Okay, I am going to get started. Hopefully we'll have a couple more people trickle in, but if not, that's totally fine too. This is actually a great size for the activity that I had planned. My name is Ariana Smith. I am the, I will enable that. I am the LGBTQ plus and diversity coordinator here at UMSL. I actually just started back in June. So I'm still fairly new. This is going to be my first year on UMSL's campus. So I'm very excited to be here with you all today. We are going to be discussing creating more inclusive spaces, particularly in our student organizations. But I think a lot of this material will actually translate to really any space that you are in, whether it be on campus or just in your life in general. So to begin, our agenda for today is we're going to start with community agreements. I always like to start off discussing how I want the group to interact with each other. So we'll go over that. And then I have an activity planned for us, which will actually probably take up about half of our time. I hope to get a lot of engagement in this activity. So I just want to prime you all for that I am going to be looking for both verbal and chat participation. So just keep that in mind. And then we will go over unconscious exclusion, as well as microaggressions. And I have a little video planned for that discussion. And then purposeful inclusion, and then just some inclusion tips and tricks, because I think that that's probably what a lot of you are in here for, are just simple, easy ways for you to be more inclusive of anybody who might want to join your org or participate in your activities, so on and so forth. So we'll end the presentation with that. So to begin, I'll go over the community agreements. These are community agreements in general are basically just established rules for how you want to interact with each other mostly, and also how you want to interact with yourself. I think a lot of times people think about how they want the group dynamics to go, but they don't actually think of how they want to show up in spaces. So these rules or guidelines or agreements will also apply to how you speak to yourself, especially in this beginning activity. Actually, a lot of these community agreements are going to apply most heavily to the activity that we're going to do. And I'll explain that a little bit more as we go on. But to go over the community agreements, first we have be smarter than your phone. Obviously, all of you are on Zoom. All of you have your videos muted, which is totally fine. But please be present with me today. I know that everyone gets notifications. I actually have all of mine on Do Not Disturb. I really want you all to be present with me today. Second community agreement, also these are in no particular order, but second community agreement is if you do not ask, you will never receive. Meaning that if you don't speak what's on your mind, or you don't ask the question, and it doesn't even necessarily have to be in the group directly, nobody's ever going to be able to answer your question. Nobody's ever going to be able to provide the information that you might need. And you never know, that information might be something that really shifts the way you think about something or the way you move forward. You just never know. Third is stories stay, lessons leave. Again, this applies very heavily to the activity that we're going to do if people are really participating. And it basically means that the stories that we share here today stay in this Zoom room. There's no reason for me to tell you a story about myself and for you to carry that outside of this space. But if the story that I shared with you taught you something or gave you a life lesson or a personal lesson, please take that lesson to somebody else. And to give you an example, say you do learn something from the conversation that we have today. The translation outside of this space is, oh my gosh, I participated in this amazing group discussion today and I learned XYZ, versus, oh my gosh, I heard this story today. Ariana told all of us that XYZ. You want to go with the former, not the latter. Fourth is take space, make space. And really all that means is if you have something that you would like to share, please take that space, take that time for yourself. We all deserve that time. And if you find that you're taking more space than other people are, and other people might have things that they want to share, then make space for them. Maybe be more selective about when you speak up so that there is space for other people to engage as well. Fifth is your truth can change. This has been very true for me the last couple years of my life, just meaning that you could learn something today that changes your entire perspective about yourself, about the world around you, about relationships that you have. And it's okay for that to happen. It's okay for your mindset to shift, for your understanding of self to shift, because your truth can change all the time. One of my favorite, I don't know it word for word, but one of my favorite quotes is that everyone goes through major personality changes about 7 times in your life. So keep people around you who are willing to fall in love with you over and over. I just think that goes so well with your truth can change, because we do shift and we do grow as people. That's what we're supposed to do. So just be mindful of that. And then last, but certainly not least, and this is kind of my life code, is be comfortable being uncomfortable. And that simply means if some of the discussions that we're having today are making you feel some type of way, that's good. You should lean into that, because at the edge of comfortability is where change happens, is where growth happens. So if you start to get uncomfortable with anything, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad or that you should push it away. It just means that there's a lesson there and there's something to be learned. So again, these are just some community agreements to go into the conversation with and to just be mindful of. So yeah. This brings us to my activity for today. And like I said, this activity is probably going to take up the bulk of our time together. I'm anticipating 15 to 20 minutes, but this is an identity deep dive. Normally this activity is done in person, and you set up around the room these different identities that you see on the page here. And a series of questions are asked, and people will physically move around the room to stand under one of the identities. And it's called If I Had to Choose. It's basically an opportunity for you to very consciously think about your different identities and the way that they intersect with the world around you. Not many of us spend a lot of time consciously thinking about our identities and the way that we walk into a space with them. So this is an opportunity for all of us to do that. And the point of this is to realize that there are some people who very much are conscious of their identities and how they interact with the world around them because of those identities. So I want all of us to kind of go through this together. The way that this is going to work is, I can't even see. Oh, it's up here. I want to see the chat. Okay. I want all of us to, the question will pop up, we'll go through the series. And what you're going to do is I'm going to give everyone about 30 seconds to 45 seconds to digest the question, to think about their response. And then I want you to write one of these identities in your chat box, but don't hit send. And then once that 30 to 45 seconds is up, I'm going to tell everyone to send at the same time so that they all flood in all together. And then I'll kind of ask if anybody wants to volunteer and ask and talk about why they chose what they chose. And to start off, I will tell a story as well so that it kind of breaks the ice for everyone else to share. But again, going back to those community agreements, let yourself be vulnerable in this space. I hope that we create a trusting environment. I know that trust is earned, but by being vulnerable in this activity, it will probably help you understand a lot of the material that I'm going to talk about for the latter half of this discussion. So please make yourself vulnerable, be comfortable being uncomfortable through this activity. And yeah, I think it'll be really good. I adapted this from an in-person activity, so we'll kind of see how this goes. Thanks for being my experiment, y'all. Okay, so does anybody have any questions about the guidelines for this activity, about waiting until you're told to send your identity that you've chosen? Any questions at all? I'm going to take silence as a no. So let's go to the first question. Okay, the first question is, this is the identity that I know the most about. Again, this is the identity that I know the most about. Again, don't send your answers yet, but please, when you have them, go ahead and type them in the message bar, but don't hit send. Mindy and Dorian, y'all can participate in this too. I am also participating. Okay, I am going to have everyone send their responses in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Look at that. Okay, that looks great. Does anybody in particular want to talk about why they chose what they chose? Just go ahead and unmute yourself. And if we have multiple people, we'll just kind of go in an order.
I don't mind breaking the ice, Ariana.
Yeah, sure.
So I chose race, and I think I maybe looked at it in a different perspective, because obviously I personally don't understand some of the identities that come with race, but I feel like that's what is most talked about. So I want to make sure I'm clear. Like I know that I don't experience things and I don't know everything, but I feel like that's just what, when someone thinks of identity, I feel like that's one of the first things people think about, as opposed to some of these others. That was
Yes, most definitely. Yeah, no, that's great feedback. And I'm glad that you kind of brought up the different perspective. There's no wrong perspective here. However you take in the question is right for you. There's a reason that you thought of it the way that you thought of it. So there's no right or wrong answers to any of this. It could be like for mine, I chose sexual orientation because for me, that is an identity that I've been carrying around for a very long time. So I have consciously made an effort to learn as much about it as I possibly can. But for Mindy, she took it as, this is what's talked about around me a lot. So I feel like I know a lot about it because I've been part of many conversations of it. Both of those are amazing responses. Does anybody else want to speak? This is definitely an activity where I don't call on people, because sometimes people are really taking things in very heavily, and I would never want to put somebody on the spot, but I would love some participation. And there's like 9 questions, so.
I'll go.
Yes.
So my internet's acting up, so that's why my camera's off. So I said age because I've taken like so many like developmental classes, and they always resort back to, at this age you should be doing this, or at that age. So like breaking it down like different developmental, like what you should be doing at that age. So that's why I said age.
Most definitely a very academic perspective. That's wonderful. Yeah, thank you for sharing. Thomas, were you going to share?
Yes. So I grew up a Christian, and I looked at a lot of different worldviews and spirituality and different religions. And then I still kept my original point of view, but it made me more spiritual by a long shot.
Most definitely. Yeah. I think kind of going back to what I was saying just about sexual orientation, when an identity is important to us, we kind of go into a deep dive of it and try to learn more about it. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, we'll go on to the next question. Same rules apply. I'll give you about 30 to 45 seconds, and then we'll all share at the same time. So in the opposite fashion of the previous question, this is the identity that I know the least about. Again, this is the identity that I know the least about. For Lauren, who just entered the room, we are answering the question that's currently up on the PowerPoint with one of the responses that you see in the yellow dots, but just wait to put in your, or to send your response until I say to hit send. So if you don't get in on this question, that's totally fine. You can get in on the next one. Because I am actually going to have people send in 3, 2, 1. Yeah, I see some more variability in this response than I did in the last one, which is exciting. Okay, yeah. Does anybody want to talk about why they submitted the response that they submitted?
I'll go ahead and pop back in if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I picked body size because I don't completely understand how people think differently of their body size. Like, I just, like myself, like, I consider myself overweight, but I'm trying to lose weight. And so for me, it's like, you know, I'm trying to lose weight. But for other people, they're like, I don't have to lose weight. You know, they're happy with how they are. And I think that's amazing. I just feel like I know very little.
Yeah, most definitely. I feel like body size has been a conversation that has come more into the social light within the last few years, with like fat positivity and more increased discussions about certain eating disorders and things and help with that. So it's been a conversation that probably hasn't been had as much as it should. It's definitely coming more to light. So thank you again, Thomas, for sharing. Does anybody else want to share? I'll go ahead and talk a little bit because I see that there's some other people who also chose other ability status. Other ability status is something for me that I just don't know a lot about. I have had no particular reason up until the last like 3 or 4 years to learn about it very actively. But it's become very prominent in my life recently because both of my younger brothers suffer from mental and emotional neurodivergence, which just simply means like divergence from stereotypical normal patterns of brain function, whether it be hormone levels or chemical balances or things like that. So it's something that's come up in my life a lot over the last few years, but it's definitely something I want to actively learn more about. So yeah. Anybody else care to share?
I'll go, if that's okay.
Yeah, most definitely.
I said religion, even though like it's sorry, that's my child. Life of a parent and a college student. I said religion because even though like it's well known and like even in like schools, like elementary schools, they try to go over like the origins of some religions, and I've bounced around with like a lot of religions. I know there's, but it's just like to me, I don't have like a lot of knowledge because each time I try to like find a religion, because like I went to church as like a child with my family, but it like fell off because it was just like there was just certain things about the religion that didn't make sense to me. Like, for example, it might be different from other people. Like the Bible, there's like a lot of contradictions in the Bible per se, like love thy neighbor, and but yet there are some people that are like, oh well, they don't like this, or they don't accept this, or you're going to hell because of this. And it doesn't make sense to me, like different things. And I'm just like, okay, well, if you think about it, the Bible was written by man, and they make mistakes too. So like different things like on that standpoint. So that's where I fall off a little bit at. That
Yeah,
makes sense.
no, yeah, thank you for that perspective. I think that a lot of people have different religion and spirituality journeys. So thank you for sharing a little bit of yours with us. I appreciate that. Okay, I will move on to the next one. This is the identity that I tend to keep hidden. Again, this is the identity that I tend to keep hidden. It can be intentional or unintentional. If it's something that you recognize after the fact as an unintentional, that you keep it unintentionally hidden, that's perfectly fine. Again, however you take in these questions for yourself is how you can respond. I will have everyone submit their responses in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Even more variability in this response. That's exciting. Okay, I would really love to hear some new people speak this round, if we're feeling comfortable. I know that sometimes speaking in a larger group can be intimidating. So try to make yourself vulnerable, try to lean into that uncomfortability if you're able. Yeah, if you want to type your response, go ahead and I will be happy to read it to everyone. And we can keep that in mind for future responses as well if you want to type any responses that you might have. I will gladly read them. Does anybody want to speak verbally while we wait for a couple of people to type their responses though?
I can go.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm a graduate student, which means I got kind of juggling a lot of different academic stuff and responsibilities on my plate. And I put other ability status because it's kind of hard to, there's no room in the academy for like mental health days or like to take a break or this whole idea of publish or perish. And that's not, that's just not even considering like leaving grad school and then potentially getting a teaching job. So there's just like a lot of stuff that's on my plate, and it's very difficult to have those conversations with my colleagues or with other people in the field because everyone kind of is aware that we're put under a lot of pressure and stress, but nobody really ever wants to talk about it.
Yeah, most definitely. I think that what you're saying kind of makes me think of when there's like a deference of responsibility to others. It's kind of like, we're all dealing with this, so we all just have to figure it out, rather than we're all dealing with this, so let's talk about it and help each other. It's really hard to have that mindset shift, especially about emotional stability, mental health, and things like that, depending on the field that you're in. You know, if you're working in the social work department, it might be a little bit different. And I could be wrong there as well, but I know my mother is a clinical psychotherapist, and they're very big on their mental health days. So it's also very industry or field dependent, I think, sometimes with that mental health. I'm going to go ahead and read Molly's response that was written. Molly wrote, I said sexuality. I've only recently come to the conclusion that I am demisexual. My family is very conservative on both sides, except for my dad and my little sister. So I don't know when or if I'll ever feel comfortable and able to stop hiding it from them. For those of you who don't know what demisexual means, just for a very light context, I am not by any means speaking for Molly right now, but just more like a very like dictionary definition. Demisexual most of the time simply means that it takes a very, very strong connection in order for you to feel sexually or romantically attracted to another person, whether that be like an intelligence connection, an interest connection, a very deep personality connection. And oftentimes people who identify as demisexual will not have any sort of romantic or sexual attraction to another person. Some people, not all people, but some people put demisexuality on an asexual spectrum. But please do some more research for yourself. And again, I'm not by any means speaking for Molly. Molly might identify very differently with that demisexual title, but just for context. Malik wrote, for me, sexual orientation isn't something I can just share because in my youth, it was looked down on to be queer, whether under the guise of religion or pro-Black narratives. I'm still growing into it, but I know that if I came out as queer before I came out as atheist, I would be worse off, and I was already disowned for being atheist. That's a very difficult position to be in. Thank you for sharing that. That's a very difficult space to be in. A lot of people don't know what that feeling is like to be afraid of and open about who you are. So if you ever want to talk sometime, Malik, I'm always here. But thank you for sharing that with us today. That was very vulnerable, and I very much commend you for sharing that. I am going to go to the next question. This is the identity that I most like to share with others. Again, this is the identity that I most like to share with others. I'll have everyone share in 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Cool. Does anybody in particular want to share about what they wrote?
I would like to go if that's fine.
Yes, please do.
I'm Trey. So I put religion solely on the grounds that I try to be inclusive to everyone that I meet, which a lot of times there's a lot of people who use religion to exclude and hurt people, and in turns shaping a negative mindset. And where I grew, like the people I grew up around, a lot of them were just hurt by religious people a lot of the time. So oftentimes I try to make it clear that I am religious, but I do not see the same way as they do. I want you to be open with me and able to talk with me, because like I have seen both sides of the fence of people who just hurt people and using God as an excuse, and those who have been hurt by those who do it and use that as a, not to be rude, as a crutch when they just like, oh, I don't want to hear or talk about anything related to it because I've only seen the bad and that's the only thing I can expect.
Most definitely. Thank you for sharing. Kind of going back to what was said earlier, religion is one of those, it's one of those very difficult discussions that is incredibly polarizing. I mean, a lot of these identities are very polarizing. And I think that the more that we recognize those things, as Trey has mentioned, the more we can kind of bridge a lot of the gaps that have occurred in the past and due to history. But first, we have to start thinking about these things for ourselves, which is kind of what this activity is meant to do. Anybody else want to share? I'm going to start moving a little more quickly through these. But does anybody else want to add anything? Okay, I will go on to the next question. I think we have like three or four. This is the identity that I am most unsure how to talk about. This is the identity that I am most unsure how to talk about. And I will have everyone send in 3, 2, 1. Awesome. Does anybody want to talk about what they wrote for this one? This one's kind of a similar fashion to the one that I know least about, but you could have read it completely differently and have a very different perspective than that question. So please, if you want to share, go for it. There's a few people in the room that we haven't heard anything from. Whether you want to write it in the chat or speak aloud, I highly encourage you to do so. Oops. Okay. I hope that you all had some very interesting thoughts about that question, but we will go ahead and move forward just because, like I said, I do want to move a little more quickly. Next question. This is the identity that I think most people judge me by. This is the identity that I think most people judge me by. I'll have everyone send in 3, 2, 1. Got a couple of different body size answers. Some race, religion. We've got a very large race one. Gender. Does anybody want to share? I'll go ahead and start this one off because this is actually something that I've recognized more recently in my life. I put gender/sexual orientation because I'm not sure which one people attribute it to, but I identify as non-binary and I use they, she pronouns. And probably for the last 4-ish years of my life, I dress more masculinely. I do identify as masculine of center, so I am female bodied, but I do identify as masculine of center. And I think sometimes when I walk into a room and people see the way that I dress and the way that I carry myself, my mannerisms, so on and so forth, I get very conscious of the way I'm presenting, especially depending on the space that I'm in. When I'm in more queer-friendly spaces, that really fades away. But when I'm in very professional spaces, or when I'm in particularly white male spaces, I become very aware of my gender and my sexual orientation. I'm getting more comfortable with being myself regardless. But that is definitely top of mind for me whenever I walk into a room and people kind of turn to look. I could be completely off there. I don't know, because I don't ask, but that is the one that I think people most judge me by. Thomas.
Is that exhausting?
Yes. Yes, it is.
I'd imagine.
Yep. Thank you for that question. That was very validating. It is very exhausting to always be aware of something just because of the way that society has set it up for us to think about. So thank you. Did you want to share about your response?
Sure, why not? Every once in a while I get made fun of because of my body size. I'm overweight, like I said, and I'm trying to lose weight. So I actually take it as kind of like a comical thing when people do it, because I'm like, well, I'm trying, but like, like, why are you judging me?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
it's like, to me, it makes no sense. It's like, I'm trying. It's like, sometimes I exercise, sometimes I don't. But, I mean, if I'm going to be overweight, then I would have to be okay with that too.
Yeah. Yep. As I said earlier, body size is definitely something that's come up more and more that people talk about, but it's definitely one of those counterproductive societal identities, because in the one hand, you have people telling you that you're supposed to lose weight and you're supposed to look this certain way, or whatever it may be. But then on the other side are also basically shaming you for just existing. You see that in a lot of different identities, not just body size, but I think body size has definitely become more prevalent in the last few years.
And I'm not making fun of them, but some of them are also overweight. So I'm like, why are you judging me? I feel like they're judging me because they're sad about themselves sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, our thought processes go to many different things when we're in situations where we feel uncomfortable or judged. Again, unless we have those conversations, unless we start talking about identity, which is not always applicable in every situation. I'm not saying that by any means. But the more we think about these questions for ourselves, the more that we hopefully will feel comfortable in those different situations. But did anybody else want to share? Okay, I'll go on to the next one because I think we have two more. And I still want to get through the rest of my presentation. This is the identity that brings me the most joy. This is the identity that brings me the most joy. I'll have everybody send in 3, 2, 1. Oh, those came in fast. Cool. Okay, I'm actually going to make this our last question. I think there are 2 more questions, but I want to end on a high note. I know that one of these questions is kind of sad, so I'll probably end here. So if you have not shared at all, and you want to share, this is a happier question, if you will, about an identity that brings you joy, I highly encourage you to do so, and this will be the last question that we have. So does anybody want to go if you have not shared? Okay, Olivia wrote in the chat, I'm just saying, I am an engineering student and being female, I think it's pretty cool. That is very cool. Engineering has been a very male-dominated field for a very long time. So props to you. And that's just awesome. Malik wrote, being Black and atheist is just dope. I don't have no masters to report to or anything, just learning to fully embrace myself on my own terms. That is a very freeing space, especially for, and I don't want to assume your identity, but especially for a Black male presenting human, that would be a very empowering space to be in. So thank you for sharing that. I hope that all of you are having nice thoughts about an identity that brings you a lot of joy, very empowering thoughts. But I am going to move forward just because I do have a couple of other things that I need to get through in like 7 minutes. So I will skip the next questions. Okay. So we are going to talk quickly about unconscious exclusion. As you can see up on the screen, it simply means to unknowingly exclude others simply because you did not think about what needs they have in order to participate in your activity. It is very hard for people who do not hold a certain identity to think about what that identity needs on their own. If there's no context for why they would need to think about that consciously, they usually don't, which leads to unconscious exclusion. I'll give you a very personal example from my experience in my younger years. I think I was like a sophomore in college, so this was like a while ago. I was at a leadership conference, and one of my group mates was a deaf studies major out in California. And they simply posed the question to the group of like, hey, there are no deaf students here. There's no translators or interpreters. Why is that? And after that group session, I just went up to him and I asked, and I was kind of like, hey, don't you think that like deaf students might feel uncomfortable in this space just because most people are hearing? And he just looked at me really funny and he was like, that's how they live their whole lives. We just bring in interpreters so they can participate too. And I really, in that moment, had to take a step back and think about the question that I had just posed and why I had posed it. That was definitely a moment of ignorance for me, and ignorance is not a bad thing. It simply means that it's space for you to learn and grow. But not that I put on that event by any means, I was just a participant, but because I am a hearing person and I do not actively have a reason to think about what the lives of a deaf or hard of hearing person would go through, I unconsciously would have excluded them from that event for no other reason than the fact that I did not actively think about what their needs might be. We can do this a lot in different spaces. So that's definitely a term that we want to be aware of as we're thinking about our marketing materials, our events that we're putting on, directions to the event, how we're communicating about events or opportunities, leadership, how we're engaging in our executive board meetings, so on and so forth. I also want to speak a little bit about microaggressions, but I'm just going to go ahead and play the video. I'm sure a lot of you know what microaggressions are, but this video will very much kind of cover it, and then I'll add a little bit at the end. Hopefully you can all hear the sound. If you can't hear the sound, let me know in the chat.
Hi there.
Hi.
Nice day, huh?
Yeah, finally, right?
Where are you from? Your English is perfect.
San Diego. We speak English there.
Oh, no. Where are you from?
Well, I was born in Orange County, but I never actually lived there.
I mean before that.
Before I was born.
Yeah, like, where are your people from?
Well, my great-grandma was from Seoul.
Korean. I knew it. I was like, she's either Japanese or Korean, but I was leaning more towards Korean.
Amazing.
Yeah. Hamshasina. There's a really good teriyaki barbecue place near my apartment. So I actually really like kimchi.
Cool. What about you? Where are you from?
San Francisco.
But where are you from?
Oh, I'm just American.
Really? You're Native American?
No, just regular American. Oh, well, I guess my grandparents are from England.
Oh, well. Hello, Governor! What's all this then? Top of the morning to you. Let's get a small tea, small tea! Double, double, toil and trouble! Mind the gap! Beware, Jack the Ripper! Bloody hell! Pip pip! Cheerio! I think your people's fish and chips are amazing.
You're weird.
Really? I'm weird? Must be a Korean thing.
I'm gonna stop it there. I love that video. I think it's hilarious, and I think it very accurately describes microaggressions in a way that is not super polarizing. Microaggressions, and I use the term micro very loosely. I think a lot of people, when they hear microaggressions, they assume that they're a small thing that shouldn't mean a lot, but they can. And I equate microaggressions to a leaking faucet. You might pass by your faucet and it might be dripping just a little bit and you don't think a lot about it, but a leaking faucet that drips 1 time per second can lead up to like $1,200 a year, or about $240 a month for extra for your water bill. So with just 1 drip every second. You can also think of this as like filling up a bucket. If you drop in 1 drop of water every second into a bucket, eventually that bucket is going to fill up and overfill. So just think about that, and think about the way that you're interacting with other people and the things that you might be saying. A lot of times people think that they're actually paying a compliment to someone when they're actually being micro or giving a microaggression. For example, a lot of people, not so much anymore, but when I was younger, especially in high school, would say things to me like, "Oh, you're so beautiful for a Black girl." It's like, I don't know why you had to add on the contingency there on the end, but that's not actually a compliment. So I just wanted to speak about that. So purposeful inclusion, this goes back to our unconscious exclusion discussion and how we can kind of counteract that. Is just to be purposefully inclusive, to actively think about what people might need in order to participate in your activity or read your newsletter or what have you. For this, we want to think about universal design. Universal design simply means that it is a design that is going to be for everyone, regardless of their ability to read, their ability to really do anything. I like to give the example of handicapped bathroom stalls, which are usually much bigger and the door always swings outward instead of inward. If we made all bathroom stalls that way, nobody would ever have any issues. But because of money and because of time and because of effort, there's usually only 1 per bathroom. Which is very unfair to not just people who need accessible bathrooms, but to a lot of different people who use the restroom. This goes back to the body size discussion. A lot of times bathrooms are designed for people who have very small body frames. So if you think about universal design, you don't have to deal with those uncomfortable and inaccessible situations. This next would be education. To just actively go out and learn about something. If you're like, "Oh, I really want to make sure that this is inclusive to XYZ," go and Google what it would take to be inclusive of those folks. And then mindfulness. This just kind of ties into everything that I've already said. Also listening. If you have somebody in your organization who is of a different identity to you, maybe they don't hold an exec position, but they are an active member in your group and they're telling you something about what they might need to engage with you, listen to what they're saying. And then last but certainly not least, probably the most important, is to take ownership over the fact that you are the one putting on this event. You are in charge of thinking about these things because of your leadership role. And I promise you, the more actively you think about these things, the easier it will become as you move forward and the stronger of a leader that you will be. And then last, but not least, I'm sorry, I didn't leave a lot of time for questions, but just some quick tips and tricks of how to make sure that you're being more inclusive, whether it's in an org or it's in your communication about things with your org, is one, to establish community agreements. I love establishing community agreements because it very much sets the tone right at the beginning of anything that I'm doing, that this is how I want us to interact with ourselves and with each other. And by ourselves, I mean like internally, how I want all of us to interact internally and externally. This is a great exercise to establish in your exec meetings, in your regular membership activities. It wouldn't be super easy to implement if you're doing something like come and go, like a tabling event or something like that. But if you're ever doing like a movie screening or some sort of activity night or something along those lines, establishing community agreements very early on. You could also establish community agreements for your org in general and have them posted on your website or your Facebook, so that, similar to what Mindy was saying in her last session, so that when people go to look you up and think about interacting with your organization, they know what you're about. They know what's in your DNA. They know how you want to treat and interact with members. And it very much sets the stage for what you care about. Second, to include your pronouns in everything. Making pronoun usage common will take away that uncomfortability for folks who need to establish their pronouns with people, because many people don't respect them. So in order to do this, add your pronouns to your email signature, add them to your Zoom name, especially in the virtual world that we live in right now. Add them to name tags that you might have for your events, and use them every single time you introduce yourself. That means to everyone. A lot of people run in the wrong direction with this is that they only use their pronouns when they introduce themselves to people that they perceive to be of a non-binary or transgender, and that can be very assumptive as well as a microaggression. So just use them anytime you're introducing yourself to anyone. It's super easy. Hi, my name's Ariana Smith. My pronouns are they, she. Done. And it also normalizes it for other people who wouldn't have thought to use that. 3, make sure your visuals are readable. This means like putting light text on dark backgrounds or dark text on light backgrounds. Also making sure that size is legible. A lot of times people will put very small text in pamphlets or in presentations, and that can get difficult for some people. Think about accessibility routes. If you're having an event somewhere and you tell people use the east stairwell, and that's the only directions that you give, that is not an accessible route for a lot of people. So making sure that you also, even saying use the escalators. Escalators are not accessible for everyone. So making sure that you're giving directions using elevators or ramps, so on and so forth. And then 5th, always have a plan for food options. A lot of people have different dietary restrictions and things like that. So while it's very easy to plan a catering event, just making sure that you're thinking in the back of your mind, if somebody is vegetarian, gluten-free, keto, vegan, so on and so forth, that you have a plan. Maybe those people don't show up, but that you're ready if they do. Again, that goes back to that universal design. And then lastly, never make assumptions. Don't assume what anybody needs. Don't assume who people are. Going back to the pronouns usage, don't assume that you know that somebody is queer or trans and only use your pronouns with them. Just never make assumptions about anyone. Let them tell you who they are and then respect that. And then I had a questions page, but we are definitely over time, and I do want to give y'all time to have a break. Mindy, if you could add the attendance. Yes, perfect. Please make sure that you're clicking on this Google form for attendance. And then here's just a quick little page about me if you want to email me or contact me or come see me in my office, which is in the OSI suite. I'm more than happy to talk to you about making your orgs more inclusive, talk up to you about anything you have going on with identity, speak to any of your orgs or what have you. I'm more than happy to interact. I'm super excited to see everyone coming back to campus and interacting in these ways. So thank you for participating with me today.